Hi, Farah. How are you?
Hello, Janki. How are you? Thanks.
Okay, Farah Ishtiaq's work intersects several fields such as conservation genetics, evolutionary ecology, and disease ecology. At the start of her career, she studied storks in Bharatpur and the forest owlet in Maharashtra, which had then been newly rediscovered. Later, she branched off into bird diseases, studying avian malaria in Pacific islands such as Hawaii and New Caledonia, and avian influenza in Mongolia. Farah works at the Tata Institute of Genetics and Society, Bangalore. Okay, let me start off by asking, what's your favorite bird?
Okay. Well, that's a very difficult question to ask a bird watcher. Which is your favorite bird? Well, I really like minlas. I named my daughter after minla. Monals. Owls are my favorite, all-time favorite. I have a lot of accessories in my house, which is on owls actually.
What are
Yeah.
minlas? Sorry, for viewers who might not know what it is.
Well, minla are really small Himalayan birds. They're not really colorful, but they have very nice, sweet call, and they're very active. And uh, there are 3, 4 kinds of minlas actually, and they like to go in mixed hunting parties. So yeah, they're beautiful birds.
Right. Where would you most like to live?
Wow, I would love to live in a nice, quiet, really green place, somewhere close to a forest, where you have good interaction or you can see good wildlife, birds. Yeah, that will be an ideal place for me to live. Yeah, away from this hustle and bustle of city.
Who are your favorite writers? Not restricted to biology, it could be novelists too.
Right. I really enjoy reading Arundhati Roy's stuff. She writes really heavy things on social issues, and it's quite serious, but it's really nicely done. I've read books by Chetan Bhagat. I mean, he tackles some of the social problems in India, with the families and other issues. But recently, I've been reading this book it's called just the Mosquitoes, done by Timothy Wingard. And it's really nicely done. It talks about how the mosquito colonization has shaped human history and how mosquito colonize and the diseases have, sort of expanded their range, which changed the course of human history. It's really nicely done. I totally recommend people reading that stuff. And yeah, usual stuff on adaptive evolution on Darwin's Finches by Jonathan Rayner. It's really nice. Jane Goodall's book, they are classic to read and motivated about wildlife, so it's nice.
Okay. Okay, so you studied the ecology of storks and the forest owlet. Did you always know you would make the switch to diseases?
No, actually. I'm a very passionate bird, ecologist. And switching to diseases was quite accidental. I really wanted to learn some new tools and techniques which I can bring in my work. And I thought genetics would be a very good thing because it brings a new perspective to my work and I can look into the DNA and how things evolve. And I applied for several postdocs. This is long ago. And I stumbled on this postdoc on bird malaria in Smithsonian. And Rob Flesher, he was heading the lab on conservation genetics, and he had this project on Hawaiian bird malaria. And that I was a perfect match for that lab because they've been looking for someone who knew birds from India or say Asia in general. And they trained me in lots of things, and it was life-changing experience for me. Yeah. So yeah, that's how I switched to bird diseases.
Okay, why study malaria? Sorry, I mean, there are other serious diseases, I would think, like avian influenza, for instance, that has.
So with respect to that work which I did on Hawaii, for example, a lot of bird decline or extinction have happened because of bird malaria on these islands. I mean, Hawaii is so far off from the mainland, and the birds which have evolved there, they have no immunity to most of the pathogens, and especially to these blood-borne pathogens. And by this human-mediated, accidental introduction of mosquitoes, and later on birds actually brought malarial parasites on these islands. So introduced birds brought malarial parasites with them, and the mosquito managed to transmit it to the native species, which have no immunity to these parasites. So since then, it became a very big conservation problem for isolated populations, which may not have evolved with no immunity to malaria. And yeah, so something like 90% of bird native species in Hawaii actually declined or gone basically because of bird malaria. And since then, I think this happened. I mean, so the whole avian malaria field have evolved a lot, like in the last, I would say 18 years or 20 years, say the whole of last decade. I think so many researchers have come along now working at a continental scale as well to understand how many different, parasite lineages or different parasites of bird malaria are there, what kind of mosquitoes might be involved. So it has become a very big problem or a big issue from the conservation as well as from understanding the ecology and evolution of a disease as well.
So do the same mosquitoes bite birds and humans? Is there a chance of people getting avian malaria?
So yes, mosquitoes do bite all kinds of hosts. I mean, we get bitten by, the mosquitoes which might be biting the birds and vice versa as well. But for making that switch, it's just not possible because the host specificity within a mosquito, how they develop the parasite or we as a host can actually sustain the parasite or it's a very, it works in a very different way. So that switch is just not possible. So like human malaria is transmitted mainly by Anopheles mosquitoes and bird malaria is through some Culicine mosquito. It could be Aedes or Culex or Mansonia kind of mosquitoes. But yeah, there's no chance of bird malaria switching to humans. Well, not in it's very remote chance, to be honest. Yeah.
That's nice to know. It's a relief to know.
Yeah.
So where do mosquitoes bite birds? They're so covered in feathers. You would think it's hard to find bare skin to bite.
Yeah, it is. I think the birds usually get bitten on their feet or the skin around their eyes or close to the beak, or mainly when they are resting or roosting actually, or incubating basically on the nest, or even as a fledgling, very small, the young ones without any feathers. They're really exposed to these different mosquito or other insect vectors which can transmit these parasites.
Wow. So there are 4 or 5 kinds of malaria that affect humans. How many kinds affect birds?
Oh, wow. Okay. So we believe that now looking at the diversity of parasites we have seen in birds, it could be a lot higher than the number of species of birds we have on the planet, actually. It's a huge diversity. So when I say bird malaria, I'm not just referring to the Plasmodium group of parasites. Birds also get something called malaria-like parasites called Hemoproteus genus and also called leukocytosome genus. They all give malaria-like symptoms to these birds. But Plasmodium is the classic one, which is referred to as the avian malaria parasite. And the interesting thing is that all these these genus have their own vector species, the insect vector, through which they get transmitted, basically. So like Plasmodium is transmitted through mosquitoes, Hemoproteus through these small Culicid biting midges, actually we call them, and the leukocytosome through the black flies. So it's a very complex system. You have multiple vectors, multiple parasites, and multiple hosts, basically, in an environment, which are sort of giving the similar kind of system, and birds are carrying them around, basically.
Right. So you were talking about Hawaii, which I can understand is very, the birds living there are very susceptible because they are remote, they haven't developed immunity, and then they suddenly get hit by this mosquitoes and parasites. It's like one big whammy. So what about Indian subcontinent? I would imagine that these birds have lots of parasites. They are being bitten by lots of mosquitoes. So they must all be affected by malaria, right? And they're not dying off as that I can see.
It's true. Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the birds in Indian continent, you would think they all have evolved with these parasites, as human malaria is also endemic to Indian subcontinent. But you see, the thing about the malaria, it's a very interesting system. But mosquitoes and the parasite development is totally dependent on temperature. So if you go to a very high elevation or a cooler environment, you will not see too many mosquito species, or very few or none at all. And same for the parasite. Parasite also needs a certain temperature threshold, so below which parasite will not develop, and higher than that temperature, parasite will not develop at all. So it's just completely stopped. And there are areas in India, like in Himalayas, where I work, where you don't find that kind of temperature range at all. And this is something which I've been trying to understand, that in high elevation environment, for example, say anywhere above 2000 meters or 2600 meter or 3000 meters, what kind of diversity of mosquito or other vector species we can see? And do we see birds infected with malaria in those kind of habitats? The resident birds, which actually live there, they occupy these habitats year round, versus the ones which go and migrate into the lowlands in the winters, basically, who get infected with a lot of parasites in the lowland. And the birds which are actually not going down, they are the one probably have evolved without being exposed to these parasites, and probably should have set of genes which doesn't prepare them to, face any new infection or new pathogen. And this is something I was want to understand, that the ones in the lowland, when they come back to the breeding ground in the summer, they all are occupying the same habitat. So all you need is the right temperature, right mosquito or an insect vector species to transmit that infection from a migrant to a resident bird. And then what happens? Do you see a mortality in the population or not? So at this stage, we don't know if there is a decline or anything, but I can tell you what species are infected and which ones are not.
So how do you know birds have malaria? Like, what are their outward symptoms? Are they all sitting there shivering with temperature and you go and get them? How does this work?
So physically, when you look at them, you can't tell whether a bird has a malaria or not. I mean, an active bird flying around probably may have chronic infection, which means they have had the malaria in the past and now they have recovered. So they're not showing any sign of, the symptom of fever or lethargic or tired. But a really sick bird is very hard to find in the wild. It might probably be hiding somewhere in the bush or, sitting on a tree quietly. And those are the ones I never get to catch in my nets, and the mist nets, which I use for trapping these birds, and then I take a little blood sample. So the only way we actually screen them, we take a little drop of blood samples from these birds, and later on I look at either the slides, which is a traditional way of looking for the blood parasites in the blood film, or we do a molecular, which we call a PCR or polymerase chain reaction, where you detect basically the parasite with a specific probes. Is it there or not? Infection. So yeah. That's why we need to sample a lot of birds to see that.
I know you touched on this before, but are there any birds that are resistant to malaria?
Resistant? Well, I think most of the birds get infection and they sort of survive. So in terms of the resistance, so resistance is something you get the infection and you survive the infection, right? And I think the species which we see around us, say maybe bulbuls or manas or other common birds, if you see infection in them, they all are carrying these infections, but it's not really dramatically influencing their everyday or the population unless we do a proper study. But yeah, they all are resistant. And resistance, actually, when we talk, actually it's in terms of if you get a virulent, some very infectious strain in the population, suddenly there's a mutation in the pathogen or some malarial parasite, which has become very infectious to these birds, which they have not had any immunity to. then they will not have resistance. But for the common parasites, which is there in the bird community, they pretty much are exposed to most of them and they survive those infections. So yeah.
Yeah, the reason I asked was because in human malaria or human beings, we say that people with sickle cell anemia have some sort of resistance. I was wondering if there was something similar in birds.
No, nothing like that. But and birds don't get sickle cell anemia. They don't. And all we can tell from the birds is that how many say. So this is a very interesting question you have asked. So this is one of the things I was trying to see. So the birds, for example, in the lowland, say 600 meters of elevation, probably are exposed to a large number of parasites and also the mosquito species. And with this constant warm temperature throughout the year, they probably are exposed to these parasites. So the transmission of malaria, as we have seen, is throughout the year. So these birds have evolved with these parasites. So when I look into these immune genes, what we call, which actually protects a vertebrate from different pathogens. So the more diverse set of immune genes you have, the more you can combat these infections. This is how it goes. It has been proved in a number of taxa in humans, even in other mammals and in birds as well. And in the high elevation environment where you don't have too many parasites as one would think, you would expect to see less number of these genes or hardly many, because why would you have, so this is something which I have tested, and I have seen that the birds in the high elevation, some of the sets, I won't say for all, because we do it in the, you need to be able to have a species which is distributed across all elevation, from low, medium, and high, and then only you can compare this. High elevation birds don't have that diverse set of genes as the low elevation. We are going to publish this very soon, actually. And same for the Hawaiian birds, for the native ones, they didn't find a very diverse set of genes, actually, the immune genes, as opposed to the mainland counterparts. So here is the answer, that they don't have much resistance to some new pathogens, which allows them to deal with these different parasites, basically.
Let me ask you about house sparrows. Like, there has been a lot of anxiety about their disappearance from our cities. Some people think it's because of grain transport getting more efficient, that their birds aren't able to get any feed. And others are saying it's the lack of housing spots. And so there's a campaign to get people to put up nest boxes and that sort of thing. So, and then there was this recent study which showed that house sparrows disappeared from several suburbs of London because of avian malaria. Do we know anything about what's affecting our house sparrows here in India?
We don't know. I mean, we definitely don't know whether it's because of any disease, to be honest. So I've seen, the recent report from eBird, from the the bird count, based on the citizen science data, it shows you that there has been decline in the past, but the population is coming back, and it's doing really well in the rural areas and compared to the urban areas. And but what actually triggered the decline, nobody knows, basically. I mean, London study, which you give the example, has been done very well. They are monitoring the decline in the population, and they're testing for disease aspect as well. This is why what I say, that this particular aspect of disease ecology is completely missing in India. I mean, this happened for vultures as well. When vultures declined, people thought it could be because of a disease, and somebody actually wrote a note saying, "Oh, it's because of the bird malaria," basically at that point in time. But unless we really do this surveillance and involve disease as one of the aspects, it's very hard to tell what's going on. I mean, just finding parasite here and there, it's not going to help. I mean, I have found a lot of parasite in house sparrows during my work, but it's not a proper structured study where I can say, across a landscape, the decline versus non-declining population, do I see any change, or compare it basically between the population. So that's why I say having disease ecology is a very important aspect, and one should combine with the bird data.
So a lot of people are now feeding birds, but I can't tell whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, because there are some bird people who say, yes, feed, and others who say don't feed. So what do you recommend? Because when you set up a bird feeder, and if you're, let's say it's grain eating birds, you get a whole flock of them, a whole community of them coming together and feeding in one tiny area, and there is greater chance of disease spreading between them. So what do you, with your perspective of bird diseases, what would you recommend?
Um, so I think, so yes, bird feeding is a very big cultural thing, right? It's not just limited to birds. People like to feed other animals as well, dogs as well, and people put out food for cows. It's done for macaques as well, say around the temple or other areas in India. And rest of the world, people feed birds in their gardens and stuff. And with respect to birds, I think people who like to feed birds, this is the way they connect with birds. They really like birds. They want to see birds around them. That's why they are feeding them. So, which I think is great. But I think really the onus lies on the responsibility of how you're feeding them. So are those bird feeders cleaned properly? The hygiene is a major issue, right? You've got to take care of them. You just don't want to put the food out and it's getting infected with all kinds of things and these flocks of different species, the munias and stuff coming and hustling together and feeding on them, and they are getting this infection through the food or being together on that particular feeder. So I think it's a big responsibility if people manage and do it properly. I think there is no harm. I mean, saying people not to feed, it's a big cultural change, which is not going to happen overnight, and we can't stop that. It's like people putting food out for dogs or eating biscuits. But are they taking care of those dogs? Are they immunizing them? Are they sterilizing them? Otherwise, it's just a constant cycle. You will see a lot of street dogs, basically. So while interacting with wildlife comes with a lot of responsibility. It's just not what that I want to enjoy. Am I taking care of that? I mean, is it all clean? They should not get infection from my feeder, basically. I think if it's done in a proper way, I think it's fine. Basically. That's my view on that. Yeah.
Okay, let me change gears. What were the difficulties you had to overcome as a woman, especially as a mother of a young child?
Right. So, yeah, I don't want to give a very long-winded answer for that. Yeah,
Okay. Please feel free. It's okay.
So women face difficulties or challenges at different stages, in different form in their culture, in their lifetime, in their career, basically. So for example, my family, I grew up with the parents. My parents were physicians, they were doctors. Somehow I got interested in wildlife, but my mother never wanted me to pursue a career in wildlife. And just the idea of doing a master's in wildlife science and later on pursuing a PhD, going to Bharatpur and doing all that fieldwork was too much for her to handle in her own ways. And that has been a constant battle for me to overcome. And also stress, had it not been for my father who really supported me, I probably wouldn't have done that. And then when you're out in the field, when you overcome a bit of these personal challenges back at home, then there's people. I mean, I feel for men at some level, you can go and, sit with the forest guard or somebody, have a cup of tea, ask about the birds or the habitat, what's going on, is anything nesting, or depending on the questions you want to understand about the national park, and they are very free. But with women, it's not very easy. I can't do that. I could never actually. And Bharatpur being such a big male-dominated, male-chauvinistic society, it was really hard.
What do you mean? Like, what happens if you were to engage in a conversation with them?
So they don't look at you in a very nice way. I mean, either they feel you are, it's just a cultural thing. They are not used to, at least I'm talking 25 years ago, really, or 20 years old. They're not used to seeing women sitting around with them. Maybe now it has changed. They are more used to seeing women, coming out in the field and doing the work. But those days, it's a big thing. I mean, you're doomed you're labeled as either sort of not very good with your character because you're hanging out with them by the forest, by this fire and having this little cup of tea or something, or you're too snobbish because you're not paying any attention. You're just minding your own business. And Bharatpur does have, this culture of the guides which bring tourists to show the birds around. So yeah, it was a very difficult or strange kind of environment actually in the park, which as to navigate as a woman, it's very hard. Where do you fit? Where do they see you as fitting in that kind of thing? It was very gray. It was not very clear to me, and you need to learn how to do it. I wish I had a mentor who could help me to understand how to do that. And yeah, that was hard learning thing. Yeah, and having a very supportive spouse, as my husband has been very helpful. So when I had my daughter, I had to go to field work for a really long time. So, and he was very supportive of, being away to the field for 3-4 weeks in a row with a small child. It's difficult. So that really helps. But I would say the biggest challenge for me is I could handle all that hard work in the field and everything. But I do feel what really let me down is the policies, which I always talk about, which to do with the age. And, it's such an ageist culture we have in India, which doesn't allow women scientists actually to get absorbed in the system very easily. To give you an example, I mean, there's a clause that everywhere when they advertise in a lot of academic institutions, there is an age bar that they prefer for early entry-level position, either it's an assistant professor or a lecturer, you have to be below, they prefer basically below 35 years, which means the moment they see your CV, you have crossed 35, you're not likely to get shortlisted for that particular job. And even if they do, they tell you on your face, well, but you're too old for this job. Too old means you could be 37 or you could be 38. Now for a woman, 35 is a prime age. Should you be starting a family because, you as you grow older, the chances of having a child decreases? Or should you be just put everything in one box and concentrate on your culture? So that's a very big call. So from finishing your PhD, then you're expected to do a postdoc. It's a very small window which is allowed where you can make this transition suddenly from a student or a researcher to be a PI, or where you can teach and be in a university or in an academic institution. It backfires the whole policy and nobody actually pays any attention. And I no wonder one of the reasons for having so few women ecologists or scientists in the field and who are actually in this position is so few is because of this reason actually. And I see people have finished their PhD and they don't find any stability, in terms of jobs or pursuing their career, which they are so passionate about. It's very brutal. It has to change.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you wished you had a mentor to help you tide through these difficult stages. So do you have students now whom you are a mentor to?
Well, so mentoring is, you can't mentor people unless they want to be mentored, as you know, right? So it's a two-way process. I do. I mean, I would give advice to people if they want me to. I won't give unsolicited advice. And there are people who have worked with me and who clearly want to discuss what should the route they should be following. I mean, mentoring for me is just not about telling them about a research problem or writing a paper or how to fix a grant. There are a lot of things which we have to deal with. What should I do? Should I be leaving this, or I'm having this problem? How do I face this? There's lots goes on in the background. It just doesn't stop there. But having a good mentor really helps you to navigate those, that landscape where you are facing those challenges. It's really, really important. And I always tell people, it doesn't have to be a scientist or somebody from your field. It's somebody who just understands you, knows your work, and navigate you, in a very neutral and positive way. That's all you need, basically.
So during this lockdown, where you can't go out anywhere, do anything, at least outdoors, has this impacted your fieldwork?
It has really. It's been very difficult. I mean, fortunately, most of the researchers who were out in the field at that time, who were doing the mosquito collection surveys and stuff, we managed to get them back just before lockdown. So luckily nobody was stranded anywhere. But yeah, we were due to start some new work on the dengue and mosquito habitat and surveys and stuff. So all this is on a hold. We can't do anything unless things get normalized in some ways, which is not looking very good at the time, right? At this point of time. So we don't know. Yeah, it's been a big bummer actually.
Thank you so much for this interview, Farah. It was a pleasure
Thank you, Dan.
talking to you.
No, thank you for having me. Yeah.